All right. So,
Can I ask you, will all of the breakout rooms be recorded?
yes.
Oh, great.
So let me see. We've got a good amount of people in this room. So yeah, if you want, you can either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I will just pick whoever's like raised their hand. So I see Carmen. You could go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so I have 3 questions. This just came up while everyone was talking. How do the projects connect with each other, or do they, depending on the level of how you roll out the programs? What is the cost associated with it? Because I know that that's a big question for all libraries, whether we can move on certain programs. And then my last question is, as librarians, we can provide, empathy and compassion, but how do you draw the line between just regular discussions about mental health, and then when you encounter someone who needs help greater than this project?
Those are great questions.
Thank you.
So I can start by, let's see, the first one, did you mean like the final outcomes of the project and how they relate to each other, or like which aspects?
Meaning you're sharing this information and we're hearing stories about people who have incorporated this project in various facets. Do we somehow, if this is something that we look to do in our library system, do we report it back to you as, the initiator, or do they all operate in like sort of separate factions?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we have the info on VRtality.org, and you can just use that. Like the grant funded portion is just like that. Like you don't have to report anything to us. I don't know if that answered what you were looking for. Okay, and going. Oh yeah, if you want to answer, and Caitlin.
I was just going to say there, if in the invite to the session today, they just got a new grant for another 3-year project. So if anybody is interested in doing it in a more collaborative way with other sites, definitely get in touch with Juan. Oh, there's Juan.
Yes.
I am.
Yeah, we were just talking about the grant opportunities that may be upcoming, and if people are interested.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, I can talk, the grants are everywhere, but I can talk about like IMLS. I think IMLS requires you to send a 2-page proposal first. And I think that is due in September of this year. And then after they review that, and if your idea is really strong, they will invite you to submit a full proposal, which is a 10-page proposal. And they're looking about, you have to look at the different objectives on there, and then link the grant to one of the objectives. And then there are like national leadership grants that are about programming, and then there's the Laura Bush that is more about capacity building with libraries.
Thanks, Juan. So yeah, that leads into your second question, which was like, how can you get funding for this, or like, how do you know like the costs for a program like this? So yeah, if you visit the website VRtality.org, you can see links to all the equipment that we used. And then you can pick and choose really which aspects you want. We're really emphasizing that you do not have to do a co-design program with VR. That's just what we were doing, but it's whatever your library's capacity is. And if you need to seek grants or other funding, it could, maybe take a few years to build up a program to get that funding level. So hopefully that answers your funding question. And then the last question was about mental health. So yeah, when it comes to if a teen is having issues that are outside of the scope. We did all as participants in this, you know, talk to our mental health like researchers, and we learned a few of the resources that are available. You can always refer outside resources to the teams, and also we were like very sure to mention that teams, if they needed to step out or take a minute, turn off their webcam or something like that, just emphasize that it's a safe space for them to participate where they are at on any given day. So that's really how we would handle those kind of situations.
Yeah, I want to add something about that mental health piece, because I think that there is sometimes we're not providing therapeutic services, right? We're not suggesting solutions. We're just here to talk about it, listen, and see, support it, right? That portion of suggesting what they should do in circumstances, we don't do that, right? And you don't in the program, because we're not equipped to that. We're not qualified to do that. You can refer them to other services. But this one is more about this kind of conversations and the design of something.
So are there any other questions? Can you raise your hand or put it in the chat?
I did have a question.
Oh, sure.
I know I saw some chat already when we were in the main room about people saying they didn't have any experience with VR. And that's probably one of my biggest concerns, is I feel like I've done, I didn't call it co-design, but I've done programming like that with teenagers for years, where I'm creating programs with them. Having discussions about mental wellness is something I feel comfortable with. I think I'm a generally techie person, but not like a build an app person. So while this looks fascinating to me, I'm just wondering about the technology component of it. Like what I think I heard one of you, and I can't remember exactly who said it. One of you were excited about one of the rooms. I think it may have been the Cat Cafe, one of my favorites too, when they said that they actually had an opportunity to help create that room. So is it something where we have these discussions with students and we hear what they want to create, and then we have to get someone else to create it? Or are these programming techniques simple enough for a person who sort of has average amount of tech skills to do this?
Yeah, so this is going to depend on like the technologies that you use. In our specific case, we were using the Oculus Quest, which is now Meta Quest. And we actually partnered with developers, like VR coders and developers and college interns who were skilled in this, and they created that. Now, they actually built the app. What the staff's role was and the teams was we co-designed. So we went through the ideas generating process. We wrote out all the core ideas that we wanted in a mental health experience in VR, but we didn't actually have to create that. Now, everyone might be doing it in different ways if they decide to build off of this. So for example, I would say one recommendation I have is we used CoSpaces, which is another type of app where you can create actually a little I think it's AR and VR, you can experience things. So that means you can see it on your phone screen, like in, like how that Google has things that overlay your camera. You can do that kind of thing, and you can also look at it in VR. And so that's like a standalone app service that if you get a subscription to, you can have multiple people building things together, and it's just kind of like a drag and drop kind of deal. So there are a lot of options, but in our case, we did actually have software developers essentially to do that.
Yeah, it's a very ambitious project, right? This one, it requires a lot of technical support. And like Kathleen says, like we rely on outsourcing the building of the VR experience, right? And we have experience working with them. I think a way is like what Kathleen said, like using co-spaces to introduce the idea of creating virtual worlds can be something really good. But even just using the apps that we created and having a group of teens coming together and experience as a way of introducing the idea of mental health awareness is a good way to start, right? Like, I think that this was like a level that it was rather complex. But you know, we did it, and we learned a lot in the process, right? And one of the things that we learned was like maybe the complexity was a little bit too much, right? To require a lot of resources and a lot of learning curve and effort.
Okay, go
So
ahead,
I
Taylor.
have a question regarding next steps. So you work with these teams, you go through the co-design process, you work within VR. What are the next steps after this? So theoretically, they've gone through this program. Is it just good luck, guys? Here is the skill set you learned. Hope you manage it. What does that look like to you after this program's finished?
So I would say, in just like what I envision for our future programming here at DC Library, we definitely are taking that skill set and we want to introduce it to more groups of teens. We have got more VR headsets now on the way to use in programming, just through our own programming goals. And I think really building community around this type of thing would really be the like sustainable outcome from this project. You'll get engaged team participants. In fact, our very engaged team participants have already like joined in on a lot of other teen initiatives that aren't even related to this project, just because of how much they enjoyed building in that setting and how the connections they made. They actually really made friends doing that. So I think, and not only do you have a finished product at the end, if you do this multiple times, you'll end up having a library of experiences that the teens can share with each other. So that would eventually be my goal, and in some way be able to like share this with more and more of the community, just for socialization and promoting well-being.
Tyler, and you're gonna hear something of like what we're gonna do based on what these taught us at the end of the presentation. So just be on the lookout. I don't wanna spoil the surprise, but it's not a surprise. But we're gonna continue doing some work, you know, and using what we learned here also, which was a lot. Right, like Kathleen talked about, like all of the things that we learned, and you know, how do you continue the support.
Carmen.
What do you recommend is the ratio of adults to students involved?
So I will say at DC, we had about like 9 teens, I think. And we had initially 3 adults. We had 3 staff members, but then we also brought in Eric, who was our tech advisor. So technically we have 4. I think that's pretty good. You really want to have like maybe like 2 or 3 students to a person, because a lot of times in co-design, you're going to be breaking out into focus groups for like different sections. And also just the logistics of going into VR experiences. It can get very hectic if you have a lot of people all at once in one VR room. Not that it's impossible, and we did do it, but yeah, I would recommend definitely, yeah, 2 or 3 students to an adult is my personal take on that.
Carmen, you should ask that question of Allison, who was a single, she works in a kind of rural library in Texas, and the environment was just really different, and she was the only person. So she got a volunteer to help her, I think, and had Eric, but she kind of, that was one of those things where she was like, wait, but I'm just one person. How am I supposed to do this? And so she had really nice ways that she thought about what are the different roles? How can I distribute them with the people I have?
Mhm. So we try to have as many adults, like a balance, like of adults and youth, because you want to just break that power dynamic, right? So everybody is like at the same level, but that's not always possible, right? To have the 1-to-1 ratio. And then the teens and the kids really appreciate the number of adults in the room. We've heard from them in reflections that is like their feedback is something of like, I really like that there were so many teachers in the room, you know, so they really like that. I'm gonna check with Luis, okay? Have fun.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments? We can even make it a bit of a discussion if anyone just wants to jump in. If you have any ideas from this presentation that you're just interested in exploring.
To me, I was really impressed with the project. I just wonder about feasibility, especially within building the capacity to do this sort of program, especially within small and rural libraries. And that would be something I hope to see some tips or suggestions going forward with, like a toolkit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, yeah, probably Allison would have the most to say about that, because she definitely was dealing with, you know, having to build up the capacity for this. Yeah, at DC, we were in a slightly better position to just roll with it. But yeah, definitely that is a good idea. Thank you.
It's interesting, Tyler, because I work in a larger branch, but I was really thinking the same thing, just on the other end of the spectrum, because we have a lot of staff, but it's also an extremely busy branch, and it tends to pull all of our attention in a variety of directions. And I was just thinking, I heard what Juan said about the teens really loving that there were more adults in the room, and I can absolutely see how that would be wonderful and helpful. But just thinking of, you know, how I could pull, sometimes just getting me to have the time is a big thing, but then to be able to pull other adults, just trying to figure out how that could happen. So I could definitely hear you on that one, something that I'm thinking about as well. And just another, you know, piece of feedback. This also made me think of just something else that would be wonderful for the physical world, really, is to do de-stress gardening classes with students, just hands-on in the physical world, I think would be amazing. So I just want to thank you guys for that idea. I kind of jotted down a note about that for myself as well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And actually, I'll say for myself that after we did this VR project, it got me thinking more about the environment in general outside too. And I've actually started doing more like outdoors nature oriented programming just outside of our branch too, not just in VR. So that's really an excellent idea.
Cheryl, it reminds me too that we have had a lot of discussion about the feasibility and the money and and there were discussions about like, well, what if we have teens design some little corner of the library, or like, could you do it with a physical space in the library? What would whether it's a few plants or something within a budget, you could do it in a physical space. Can't smash things as much, I guess, but.
It's interesting to hear you say that. We had I was tasked to do a listening event at one of our middle schools as we're trying to update our branch's teen space. And I walked in with certain ideas of what I thought I was going to hear, but I had these really open-ended questions that really sought to get information from students and get them to talking without me actually saying, well, what do you think about this? And what we were shocked by is how many students talked about nature, how many students wanted to have spaces that were close to nature, where they were either in nature or they could see it from the teen space in the library or feel it from the teen space in the library. I had so few students, and we thought that they were going to ask for all of these, super updated tech equipment. And we were shocked that they didn't. I mean, they asked for some things that they would need for school and things like that. But we were kind of thinking we're going to have to really up our video game collection. And no one talked about that. They talked a lot about nature.
Thank you for all the wonderful ideas so far. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to go ahead. I see Carmen.
Have you had any experience with, because staffing is a legitimate issue, at least with our end, and also to be perfectly candid, some staff don't get as excited about working with teens than others. Have you had any experience with just bringing in community leaders or people in the community as volunteers to participate in the project?
So in our case at DC, we didn't necessarily do that. However, I will say we did engage a local high school graduate who actually, he initially signed up for the program, but like he ended up having the skills to be one of the programming interns to create the app, which was awesome. So I think maybe sometimes if you put out a call for something like that, you would probably get some people who would be willing to volunteer. Staffing definitely, that is a recurring challenge, and yeah, just the time constraints. I will say it was extremely difficult to make it work. So I totally understand, looking for all kinds of anything that you can get to help to facilitate this program. And yeah, when you're looking in the recruitment stage also for teens, you can also look at these organizations where you might be recruiting teens from, see if maybe they want to partner with you. And maybe you could even do the program off-site at a community center or something like that, depending on, your library and policies and all that. But there's a lot of possibilities for partnerships, I think, because people would be really interested in doing co-design.
I missed a portion of this session earlier, so I apologize if this has already been talked about, but I think the place where I'm a little bit confused is about that app development part. When you had these interns help with the actual development of the VR environments, were they coming to the program? Like, were they sitting down with the teens and talking to them about what they wanted to have in their space? Or were the teens kind of like coming up with something in the program and then you send it off to them, they build it, send it back? Like, what does that process look like a little bit more?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, we only touched on like how the like development works, like just saying that we had a development team that we were, giving the ideas to, but actually, yes, we had the interns actually participating in our sessions with the teens and with the librarians. And they were kind of like observing the actual design portions as well. So in our case, we used Miro, the virtual board, and sometimes they would even ask a little bit of clarifying question, if they really wanted to build on an idea that a teen had. So the interns, yes, were in the sessions with us, and I found it actually really valuable for them to be there. And then, yeah, the developer, we had like, the interns were like under the supervision of like a VR developer. The developer did not come to our sessions. So he was more like the person we would send, like, this is the polished plan that we would like. And then we would get versions of the app back from him and we would play test them.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It was good. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to jump in whenever. But I'll also mention, if you haven't already done this, go on VRtality.org, can build like a plan in a PDF form. I found this really helpful to just kind of review all the stuff that we used. And you can see the various technologies with links to all of them. It could be helpful when you're just still like coming up with ideas on how to make something like this work.
And I saw, it looks like it was, you only had to have one VR headset. You could have like a Quest, you could have the Google Cardboards, or
Yeah,
it just depends on what software.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of options. The Quest is like the most affordable, just like standalone VR official thing. Although I will say it's always changing, and they actually just increased the price by $100. So I don't know if we have any price lists on there, but it possibly might be outdated now. I think it's like $400. It used to be $300. So yeah, that's the ones we used, and there were also issues getting those set up because you needed a Facebook account.
Yep.
And they are going to be getting rid of that soon. They don't have a date yet. It should be this month though, that you can create a Meta account for it. But also, yeah, those cardboard headsets, they're an interesting way to really get introduced to the idea of VR. You can put your phone in them. I don't remember which apps work with that. Possibly it might be CoSpaces. I'm not sure. I know CoSpaces does do a lot of stuff with mobile. It has a mobile app. So that's definitely, we definitely recommend that one for if you're just looking to dabble in VR or virtual worlds.
The app that you used was, you said there was CoSpaces and then you mentioned Miro.
Right.
Which one did you use?
So CoSpaces is the virtual like builder thing where you can, it's basically like you go in a virtual room and just like put like pieces of things down and create a space. Okay. Miro is just more like a collaborative whiteboard essentially. So okay. Yeah, it's more of like a project management tool.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else has any other questions or comments? Feel free. And don't forget, we do have the other breakout rooms as well, if you're interested in mental health or co-design, just learning more about those processes. The other rooms are discussing that as well.